a lot of punk rock at the very start, like a lot of you that were there at the very start, we weren't liked at all. I mean, they didn't want anything to do with it. I mean, just like looking like that, like wearing a Dead Boys shirt, you're gonna get hassled. You know, colored hair, you're gonna get hassled. Looking weird, you're gonna get threatened. I mean, people were shocked at punk rock. I mean, this was out there. I mean, we're like openly, a lot of us are openly gay, openly violent, vicious, death. I mean, the stuff we were talking about, like people on the streets were shocked. They just were, I mean, if you could imagine how horrifying it was. I mean, there was articles in the newspaper like saying, these kids are going crazy, man. It was like the early rock and roll stories. You ever see the early rock, when rock started, you know, they'd go, fucking kids rocking all night, salt, you know, whatever, like crazy. So they're saying that we're holding old women down and carving swastikas in their faces, you know. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, it was really like violent, okay. And a lot of the first punk rockers were like kind of arty kids. They might have like dug like little art music. Like a lot of the early LA guys were arty kids. But then out here, like a lot of us are sportsmen. You know what I mean? We're bigger and we've been surfing and skating and, you know, and we were like bigger kids. And we weren't used to being picked on and we weren't going to be picked on. So a lot of that's when the fighting came back and we started fighting back on these guys. And this is a story, it's kind of a vicious story. There used to be a thing where I'll read it to you. Anyway, a young boy was in front of the liquor store leaning against the wall in a dress. It was a nice imitation silk, deep navy blue and almost sexual in the way the material clung to his hips. He was fucking the outfit up, wearing a pair of ratty old tennis shoes underneath. But if you didn't notice the footwear, he looked good. He'd been given a job. Each time a driver pulled into the parking spaces out front, he was to force visual contact as they entered the store. But after 15 or so visitors, he hadn't had any luck. He was about to give up when they arrived, 4 boys in a Mustang looking to pick up a couple sixers of ice-cold Bud. The dude sitting in shotgun laughed at the boy and then called him out to his friends. Finally, we might have a nibble. The fishing had been bad lately. We'd gone to this well too often, it was getting harder to reel someone in. But these dudes weren't from here. I was worried that the old Chinese man who tended the liquor store was going to warn them, but he was too busy to notice. They purchased their beer and walked out. A laughing band of 4 young studs ready to get it on. They thought they ruled the night. It was going to be pounding brews and banging bitches for these boys. That is, after they teased the little punk faggot outside the liquor store. The boy was still standing against the wall. He was small for his age. I mean, really small. My buddy Marty was really small. He was just a little, he's still small, just a little tiny little kid. It was like, you know, when those kids graduate elementary school early and they pop him in college. I mean, that's what Marty looked like. I don't even think he had pubic hair yet. He was just a little kid. And anyway, sorry about that. All right, so the boy was still standing. Against the wall. Marty was the little boy in the dress. He was small for his age, and although a tough kid, he'd been picked on quite a lot due to his size. They made a crescent around him to block his exit in case he wanted to run, but he didn't. I couldn't hear anything. I had the tape deck on and a dubbed copy of The Germs Forming was ruining my cheap car speakers. But when I saw the driver of the Mustang shove the boy against the wall, I knew we had a bite. I got out of the wagon. I was followed by 3 demons. We set the kid up on purpose and then hid back to watch people pick on him. The wagon was the nickname for my 66 Chevy Nova station wagon. It was my first car acquired for $200. When I got it, it was a light cream yellow, almost chiffon cake, but I'd taken spray paint and fixed it up. I'd drawn a middle finger salute on the roof and written the words, "Fuck you, sky pigs," underneath the finger. It was pretty funny. But now the wagon was all black. I decided to camouflage it after the lawn driving incident. Just a second ago, I told about. I pulled the license plates off a car and chased some kids. I pulled it. You know how the kids hang out after school. I just jumped the curb and went at them. It wasn't like I was going fast, but it was pretty funny. You know, watching little legs pumping as they ran. All right, so anyway, but now the wagon was all black. I decided to camouflage it after the lawn driving incident, the one where I chased those young kids across the front grass of the school. I didn't hit any of them, but the police still looked down on that kind of shit. I'd even gone as far as to paint over some of the windows. It was threatening if a car could be called threatening. I'd stenciled a death's head and a reef on the back. There were 4 of us that evening, well 5 if you count the boy. We were looking to stomp the fuck out of somebody. I copied this using the kid as bait deal from an old greaser that used to gay bash at the shore. He had a cute younger brother that he'd perch on a fence, and when guys came up and talked to the kid, he'd rush up and demand money or give them an ass beating. It worked well for a while until the gays got wise and gangbanged him. My spurs jangled as I walked towards the dudes. I always wore spurs. A lot of people wore Herman boots. I did not. I favored cowboy boots with spurs. And I kept the spurs real sharp. So I had spurs on my boots. So if I ever got in a fight, I just, I mean, you got spurs on you. It's whatever. Cowboys like them. All right, so my spurs jangled as I walked towards the dudes. I love that word, jangled. And I love the way I look, 6'3", dressed in black, fresh teeth cuts across my knuckles, and of course, my polka-dotted scarf. What's up, Jess? I addressed the boy, taking no notice of the 4 wannabe tough guys circling him. My companion stood back, a crescent around a crescent. The dudes knew they were fucked. If Peckinpah had directed this scene, you would have seen fast edit close-ups of eyes darting back and forth, concern and panic coupled with a stifling feeling of being trapped. We were just fucking with him. The driver of the Mustang was trying to be cool, just one of the guys out having a good time explaining their actions. I ignored him and kept talking to Jess. Your sister still working at Tasty Freeze? I knew she was still working there. We'd driven over and gotten ice cream before we came here. I like that hard chocolate shell thing they do. I looked around at the dudes now as if this was the first time I saw them. So what's going on here, Jess? These fucking assholes are fucking with me. That one shoved me against the bricks. He fingered the driver, who at the time was realizing his night of pussy and cold brews was about to be traded in for a beating, and if he was lucky, a very sore drive home. I asked Jess what he'd like to do. Do you think we should fuck him up, or do you want to do it? We were starting to draw a small crowd, neighborhood kids mostly. I was digging this. Can you imagine? I was actually getting a reputation as a local hero. When younger kids started getting into punk, they had a protector of sorts. I'm friends with Jack. Jess was confused. What do you mean? He was thinking I might have been setting him up. My friends never knew when I was fucking with him, but I had a plan. I asked Jess if Jess wanted to beat the kids up. His real name is Marty. I asked Marty if he wanted to beat the kids up, and he thought I was he's like, what are you talking about? Because these guys were way bigger than him. Marty's just a little guy, But anyway, you can kick his fucking ass, and I'm talking to Marty. You can kick his fucking ass, and if he lays a hand on you, I'll stomp his fucking throat out. How's that for being a good guy? The driver stood there as Jess threw his first punch. It was funny. Jess practically had to get up on his tiptoes to hit the dude. And when he swung, he had a smile running ear to ear. His whole face was lit up. Years of being picked on were trickling out of his memory, crawling into his knuckles, and expressing themselves on the driver's head. The crowd was laughing and cheering. The driver covered his face. Get your fucking hands down. One of my partners was telling the dude to take it. It was Pat. Anyway, stand there like a man and pay for attempting to be tough. This wasn't going to last long. After 7 or 8 solid blows, the driver turned to run. I tripped him and he fell into a pole, hitting his head hard. The driver's friends took this as a cue to also take leave, but they got nowhere. In an instant, there were 4 stacks, a body line at the bottom of each one, the focal point for the kicks and blows that rained down upon it from the neighborhood kids. I loved it when everyone jumped on. Depending upon which end of a fight you're on, the beater or the beaten, a fight can be over in an instant or last forever. To me, it was seconds before those dudes had gotten to their feet and ran off bloodied, leaving the car behind. But to them, they'd spent an eternity on the ground, a long, slow year feeling each punch telegraph into their eyes, their noses, and their mouths. I walked over to the Mustang and opened the door. I had the keys, found them on the ground after the fight. Someone else had grabbed their beer. Luckily, the dudes had bought cans. A few of them had popped open when they dropped the bag, but for the most part, they were still drinkable. We pulled the radio out and slashed up the seats. We could have taken the Mustang for a joyride, then set it on fire, but I expected the police to arrive any minute. I shut and locked the door, then threw the keys on the roof of the liquor store. Jess was getting mobbed by kids. He was a pint-sized heavyweight whose standing had just gone way up in the world. Once this story got around, he was never picked on again.